In 1860, a wealthy family put their sick little girl to bed in the finest room in the house. The wallpaper was a beautiful, glowing green. The best doctors in the city examined her and were baffled. Not one of them suspected the walls. But the walls were exactly what was killing her. This is the story of the most beautiful color of the 19th century. A green so bright, so alive, that everyone had to have it. On their walls, in their gowns, in the fake flowers on the dinner table. And nearly all of it was made of poison. For most of history, a good green was almost impossible to make. Natural dyes faded fast, turning dull and muddy within weeks. A bright green that actually lasted was something people had wanted for centuries and never really had. Then, in 1775, a Swedish chemist named Carl Wilhelm Scheele solved the problem. Scheele was a brilliant, reckless man who liked to taste his own chemicals to see what they did. It is honestly a small miracle he lived as long as he did. Mixing copper and arsenic, he produced a green unlike anything anyone had seen. It was rich, it was vivid, and it did not fade. He called it, modestly, Scheele's green. There was just one small detail. It was built around arsenic, one of the deadliest poisons known to man. Scheele knew this. He even quietly warned that his beautiful color might be dangerous. But the color was too good and too cheap, and the warning was politely ignored. Beauty won. It usually does. Within a few decades, Scheele's green and its even brighter cousin, emerald green, were absolutely everywhere. This was the color of the century, and people could not get enough of it. It was in wallpaper, printed across millions of rolls. It was in paint and in children's toys. It was in candle wax and in book covers. If you wanted something to look expensive and modern, you made it green. It was in fashion, too. Ball gowns were dyed a dazzling arsenic green that seemed to glow under gaslight. A woman in one of these dresses was the most striking person in the room. She was also, technically, wearing several grams of poison. It was even in food. Confectioners used green colorings to brighten sweets and cake decorations. Some of that green was, yes, exactly the same arsenic compound. People were, on occasion, decorating their desserts with poison and then eating it. The truly astonishing part is that arsenic itself was not a secret. Everyone knew it was a deadly poison. You could buy it to kill rats. And yet somehow, nobody connected the rat poison to the gorgeous green dress in the shop window. The first people to pay the price were the workers who made these things. And no group suffered more visibly than the young women who made artificial flowers. Fake flowers were a huge Victorian fashion, pinned to hats, dresses, and hair. To make the leaves look lifelike, workers dusted them with a fine green powder by hand all day long. That powder was almost pure arsenic. The women breathed it in. It settled on their food. It worked its way into their skin. They developed open sores on their hands and faces. Their fingernails turned green. Some of them slowly wasted away. In 1861, a 19-year-old flower maker named Matilda Scheurer died in London. In her final days, she vomited green. The whites of her eyes turned green. She said that everything she looked at appeared green. The arsenic had gotten into everything, including how she saw the world. Her death made the newspapers. A doctor wrote a famous article about the artificial flower trade and called it, grimly, the dance of death. For the first time, people began to ask an uncomfortable question. If the color was doing this to the girls who made it, what was it doing to everyone else? Because by now, that same green was hanging on the walls of millions of homes. And it turned out the wallpaper had a nasty secret of its own. For a while, doctors assumed the wallpaper was only dangerous if you actually ate it, which most people sensibly did not. The paper just sat there on the wall, looking lovely. Surely a wall could not poison you, but reports kept coming in. Families in green rooms fell mysteriously ill. Children in green nurseries grew weak and pale and sometimes died. Guests recovered the moment they left the house, then sickened again when they returned. Something in these rooms was wrong. The answer was hiding in the damp. In a warm, humid room, mold would grow on the paste behind the paper. As it fed, that mold could turn the arsenic in the pigment into a poisonous gas, quietly seeping into the air the family breathed all night. So the most desirable room in the house, freshly decorated in the most fashionable color, could slowly poison a sleeping child while everyone admired the decor. The prettier, the paper, the deadlier the room. One of the strangest theories connected to all this involves Napoleon himself. When he was exiled to the island of St. Helena, his room was decorated in a rich green wallpaper. High levels of arsenic were later found in samples of his hair. Some have argued that his own beautiful green walls, slowly leaking arsenic in the damp island air, helped finish him off. Most historians think he died of stomach cancer. But the idea that the most powerful man in Europe might have been quietly poisoned by his wallpaper is too grim and too funny to ignore. As the evidence piled up, you might expect the makers of green wallpaper to panic and stop. One of the most famous of them did the exact opposite. William Morris was the great tastemaker of the age, the man who defined beautiful English design. His wallpapers were, and still are, considered masterpieces. Many of his most beloved patterns were printed in that same arsenic green. Morris did not just make the green. His family's fortune was tied directly to a mine that was one of the largest arsenic producers in the world. When people started dying, this was, you might say, a slightly awkward position to be in. So how did the great designer respond to the growing panic about arsenic? He dismissed it completely. He wrote that the doctors had been, quote, bitten by witch fever. To Morris, the whole scare was hysterical nonsense from people who did not understand chemistry. He was, of course, completely wrong. But he was rich, respected, and confident, and for years his confidence was enough to keep the doubts at bay. It is remarkable how often being certain works better than being right. In the end, it was not the doctors or the scientists who killed off arsenic green. It was the customers. As the stories spread, people simply got scared. They did not want to gamble their children's lives on a wallpaper pattern. They began demanding products that were guaranteed arsenic-free, and they were willing to pay for the promise. Manufacturers, who had ignored every doctor for decades, suddenly discovered a deep moral concern for safety the instant it started costing them money. Arsenic-free became a selling point. Companies bragged about the poison they had finally left out. Even William Morris eventually gave in, quietly switching his own wallpapers to arsenic-free pigments without ever quite admitting he had been wrong all along. The color faded from fashion, not because it was banned, but because it was no longer profitable. Britain, strangely, never actually passed a firm law banning arsenic in these products. The deadliest color of the century was defeated almost entirely by gossip, fear, and the free market deciding it was bad for business. So how did an entire civilization spend most of a century wrapping itself, its children, and its dinner in poison and barely notice? Part of it was simple. The color was genuinely beautiful, and beautiful things are very easy to trust. It is hard to believe that something so lovely could want you dead, and part of it was that the poison was patient. Arsenic here did not strike you down in an afternoon. It worked over months and years, disguised as ordinary bad luck, weak lungs, a sickly constitution. A slow poison is the hardest kind to catch because it never looks like a poison at all. The Victorians did not lack intelligence. They had brilliant doctors and chemists. What they had was a thing they desperately wanted to be safe, and so, for a very long time, they simply decided that it was. So the next time you hear that something popular is perfectly harmless, remember the most beautiful room in the house. Remember the glowing green walls, the admiring guests, and the sleeping child who never woke up quite right. Sometimes the most dangerous poison in the world is simply the one that everybody agrees is fine.